I grew up like listening to like lots of classical music. My dad was a professional musician, and he built horns for the Bach Company.
Wow.
He actually designed like the first piccolo trumpet. He's a really brilliant man. But we always had great music in the house. And you know, when I got into middle school, I got into bass. And you know, I remember I was at a chain restaurant, and I heard this bass line on over like the speakers, and I was like, "This bass is amazing!" And it turns out it was a song. It was a song called "Bernadette" by the Four Tops, and they're like a Motown group from here in the States. And kind of lo and behold, I like did some research. This is like pre-YouTube. So, you know, I had to go out and buy the CD from like a CD store. Remember those things?
Yeah.
Dating myself. But the bass player was James Jamerson. And he was a member of the band called the Funk Brothers. They were like session musicians. And they played on all the Motown stuff, from Four Tops to Temptations to Stevie Wonder to Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, all these people. And I was just like enamored by his bass playing. It was just so like liberating and free, and like was super musical, and was like the focal point, but also somehow supportive. It was like amazing. And I was like, how did he do this? And I found out after a little digging that he was a jazz musician. And I was like, I want to be able to play like that. So I decided to go to school, to university for jazz studies, to learn how to play bass like James Jamerson, to understand the inner workings of it. And from there, I got into like bebop and Charlie Parker and Clifford Brown, who was a jazz trumpet player at the same time as Bird, Charlie Parker. And then I got into like hard bop and all different like kind of different styles of jazz music, because it's not just one thing, you know. You have swing, you have hard bop, you have kind of modal, which is cool jazz, which is like everybody's associated with like the kind of Blue Album, Miles Davis. That's kind of the cool era. And then you have like hard bop, which is a resurgence of swing, with like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And then you got into like free stuff later on. And I got into some of the free stuff, but it's not, I don't know, it's cool. But what I loved about jazz music is that honestly, it's the exact same thing as classical music. It's just everything has its function, it has form, it has harmony, it has melody, but the notes are swung as opposed to being straight, you know. But if you analyze Charlie Parker solo, you know, he's using the exact same notes that Bach used on a prelude, you know. So while jazz is America's music, you know, it's the one thing that America has given to the world as it created its own art form. It's not, you know, it's notes are notes, you know what I mean? So that's kind of how I started. And it's weird, I don't really play jazz music anymore, but I use the harmony and the approach of improvisation in my scores. So like when I'm writing music, sometimes I have like themes that are like bam right there, but most of the time it's like I loop a section and I have it like I have the changes written out and like where I kind of want it to go to, and then I'll just kind of I kind of just like improvise, you know, and just kind of build the melodies from that. So that's kind of how I start. So yeah, it's definitely something that's like has been very impactful on my playing, you know what I mean, as a composer. It's interesting because it's like the goal was to always be a session musician, you know, and to kind of be like the best bass player. And then I ended up injuring my arm where I couldn't play anymore. And then that's when I got into film scoring.
Wow.
So I always wanted a film score, but I didn't have the time, you know. Being a professional musician is a full-time job, you know, like
Absolutely.
if you, I mean, not to say it's not like, not to say like it's not like, you know, without its quirks and whatnot, but I'm just saying like in the idiom that I was doing, you know, I practiced 6 to 8 hours a day on top of gigging. You know what I mean? Like always writing, always transcribing, always practicing.
Wow.
So I didn't really have the bandwidth to like score. You know what I mean?
I understand. Yeah, you'd be pretty exhausted after putting yourself into that much, like actually
Yeah.
playing with other people, and then on top of that,
It's just a
going through
lot, man.
everything.
It's
Yeah.
it's really a lot. I mean, composing is its own. I mean, it's. I mean, you can do both. I mean, you know what I mean. Like, but
Sure.
I really wanted to just focus on scoring, so that's kind of why I made that transition. So, kind of a long roundabout way to say why I got into jazz music, but it definitely influenced my playing, and it definitely has influenced the way that I approach music and the way that I approach music to picture. Very experimental, very improvisational. So
Okay, cool. No, that's good. You know, you went roundabout, and what you ended up doing is answering a whole bunch of questions I was about to ask you. So perfect. That's good. That's good. No, that's super interesting. So yeah, I guess it's more of a. I guess when you're approaching work, you are coming from that more. It's almost like you jam a little bit, kind of with your own ideas and with your own cues.
yeah.
And you're going with it as it comes along. It's not set in stone. Cool. So yeah, I mean, obviously things changed a lot for you, but it sounds like film scoring was kind of. It's funny, I was having this conversation with a composer here, and this was more so to do with. I mean, the reason he had to change his course was not through injury, but obviously through from COVID. He has a recording studio, so he had to. No one was coming to record stuff, so he had to start doing something else, which was the same thing, like something that he was always interested in but never had time to do because he's busy working in the studio. So for you, with the injury, then going on to the other thing that kind of always sat there, but you've never gone back or never wanted to make a push back the other way?
No, I don't think so, man. I mean, it's weird. Like when I was a kid, I had a couple passions. I grew up in a really small town in the States, very rural area, and it was honestly just like sports. So football, or football no te americana, as my Spanish friends would say. So pigskin. That's like, it was just that, and like just kind of hanging out, at gas stations and whatnot. And I was like, it's like I like Debussy and I like Jackson Pollock. Like I was very an odd person. So like the only thing that I really gravitated towards was the arts. So music, film, like kind of expressive mediums like painting, literature, all those things really just kind of fascinated me. Mm-hmm. So it was always a love of film and music. So, it seems like a very kind of easy transition, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, it makes sense. Have you just knocked over the coffee that you had to go out and get again?
I did. It's okay though. We're all good. I only knocked a little. I'm super clumsy, so I was frantically like cleaning it with a towel. Like, we're all good here.
That was pretty stealth.
What can I say?
Cool. Okay, so that's interesting. What's your goal with being a composer then? How would you like to progress, or do you like the sort of work that you're doing, or can you see different styles of projects in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the really fun thing about composing for film is that I get to meet so many interesting people. And pre-COVID, I would travel a lot to different film festivals, either do clinics at film festivals or kind of go on tour with films that I've written music for, and network that way. That's kind of how I got a lot of my work and build my network, is by, hanging out with other filmmakers. I mean, I think that it's each project is unique. I score a lot from scripts, so like writing music from storyboards and things like that. So that's something that's been fun that I've been able to do. I scored a cartoon show from that as well, from storyboards and things of that nature. I definitely would love to I don't know. I feel like I'd love to do different things, but I think that it's each kind of project brings its own unique flavor, and I learn something new. And every kind of bigger project that I work on that warrants it, I buy a new piece of gear to learn that piece of gear, and I use it in that score. Like it's its own kind of featured instrument.
Okay.
And yeah, like I learned how to play mandolin for a feature. I learned how to play. I learned how to play like 4 or 5 of my synthesizers from each bigger project. I just kind of like, okay, this is the instrument I'm going to use. Just because it's so easy to be like, here's my tricks, you know what I mean? And like, just bang it out. So I always, if the project is exciting to me, and the people that are the creative team who are on it, have the same vision as me, they typically do. I'm just very lucky to find kind of creatives that allow me to create my own way. It's just, each project brings something new to the table, either a different way to a different instrument, like I said, or a different approach. So like I scored a period piece film a couple of years ago, and I only used real instruments, and I wrote all the parts by hand, because I really wanted to immerse myself in that kind of approach.
Okay.
It may not have been the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like I could just draw it in my computer, you know what I mean, and knock it out. But it's like I really wanted to immerse myself in that creative process. And while that seems antiquated and kind of, like old fashioned, to like, look at a script, write music from the script, or, write parts by hand. It's just something that's, it gives a little bit of just gives it a little bit more like intentionality. And I think that translates to the film. So,
okay, that's a super interesting way of working. Basically, I've not really heard that approach before. As you say, like most people are kind of looking for if they're developing a workflow to take on tasks, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, let's define all of the steps that we do, and when they work, we keep them the same, and then we can take things away that don't work.
I just don't
like just adding a whole new thing. You're like, okay, let's.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, I don't know. I've always been scared of like dating myself. You know what I mean? Or like that's like. I understand. It's interesting when I studied jazz music. It was funny. I could pick up anybody's bass, no matter the sound, and it would sound like me. And I remember I was playing a festival one year, and one of my friends was at the other side of the festival, didn't know I was playing, and he heard me playing, and he texted me later. He's like, "Were you playing today?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I thought I heard you." It's like I didn't see you, but I could hear you. So it's like the same approach. So it's like, while I want to have that sound where it's like, this is Evan, at the same time, I don't want to be like, I guess actors say like typecasted, but I don't want to. I want to continually evolve and not be the same person. So that's why I like, changing my approach is helpful, because then at the same time, like I've started picking up editing, like editing my own footage and things like that for content for social during the season, because I can't travel with COVID. And I'm able to, because that's a skill set that's very different than composing, I'm still able to apply the approach of editing, and that's affected how I score, because it's a different process of the creative process. You know what I mean? It's something that's not film scoring, but it's changing my approach to film scoring, because I'm, like learning new disciplines and things like that. So
the constant learning seems to be like playing a vital role in your whole overall process, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. That knocks it. I'm often asking people, I guess, like, what's their workflow outside of the studio, so that if you're, sometimes it can be difficult if you need to compose something and you're not really feeling it. It can be hard to write sometimes, but I'm often asking people, like, what do you do outside when you're not in the studio? What are the things you're doing to sort of fill your tank up, if it were, to be able to be creative next session?
Yeah. I've had this conversation with other people before as well. How do you create when you have a deadline and you're not creating anything that's like evoking an emotion or pushing the film forward, things like that? And it's tricky because you have to deliver a time, because if you don't, then that messes up lots of things for people. So I think that stepping away is, even just for an afternoon or for an evening, is really helpful. I often would I've gotten a lot faster in writing, so it doesn't happen to me as much, but I know that whenever I'm working on conceptual ideas for films, so kind of like main themes, writing from scripts, things of that nature, where I have a little more time to mess with, I will just kind of sit with it for a while. I used to have a piano. I renovated my house, but I used to have a piano, and my studio used to not be next to my house, so it would be like 20 minutes away. So, after a long day, I'd come home, put my kids to bed, kind of hang for a minute, and then I'd read the script again in a different environment. And then I'd kind of, write some ideas in my head from that. So just a change of scenery is good. I often also too, like, I'll take walks, I'll go to the park with my kids. I'll take road trips, things like that. And I'll just sing into my phone, just a different little melody idea. I think that allowing you, yes, you have to create in your space to record everything, but I don't think all the ideas have to come from that. And I think that most of the time, a change of scenery, or just a completely different thing, is super helpful. Like I remember I wrote a theme to one of the features that I worked on. I think I was at Aldi's, just a grocery store. Actually, It's in Germany too.
Yeah,
it's from Germany. Yeah,
we got it.
Yeah. I was just grocery shopping, and I came up with the melody in my head, and I just sang it in my phone. And,
Perfect.
that's kind of just how it is. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And do you, knowing these things are helpful to you, is there any specific activities you would build into, any frequency, a day, a week, a month, that now that you've been working in this style as a composer for a while, is there anything that you've built in as a ritual which is specifically put there to make sure that you stay, able to create, either for just stress relief or enough time to get away? Do you block out a day or something that is for inspiration, like maybe a listening session once a month or something?
Yeah, that's tough. That's real tough. I think as a creative, in music, it's difficult to find good music to listen to, because you struggle, because it's like, you want to be inspired, but at the same time, you don't want to steal someone's thing, you know what I mean? Or you don't want to be too influenced by it. But in regards to just day to day, I definitely have blocked time. So I work from 7 a.m. my time to around 4 or 5. And I do that Monday through Friday. And, when I close my door, I'm a dad and a husband, and that's kind of what I am. And when I'm working, I'm working. I think it's great to structure, to schedule out time, you know what I mean? So in the morning, I drink coffee, I turn my computer on, I turn on my instruments, let them warm up. And then while that's going on, I'm doing email or admin stuff. And then, I may edit a video, something like that, something completely outside of film scoring. And then after that, I take my kids to school, and then I come back, and then I start writing. So I have different kind of peaks and flows of writing. I don't know if people have that you have that as well, but typically most people have different kind of creative times where they where it's easy for them. So it's tough for me because, I like to write midday, 10 o'clock to 2. That's a great time for me to write. And then the afternoon can have a lull. And then I actually get a lot of inspiration at 9 or 10 o'clock at night till like 1 in the morning. So
Yeah.
it's really tough because, you know, I'm freshly married. So it's like, I can't just stop and go out and write music. You know what I mean? So there definitely is a little bit of, you know, working around your schedule. You know, for me, obviously I have kids and I have a wife, so I have to kind of work around their schedule, you know. If you're single or if you don't have as many responsibilities, then you can kind of have some liberties. But at the end of the day, you still need to have structure.
Yeah.
You know, if this is what you want to do, even if you're doing it part-time or doing it as a hobby, like I can only write music 1 day a week, you know, from Saturdays from 3 to 6. Well, like that's your time, you block it out. You know, like I have to block out time to go to the gym, have to block out time to do these things. Same kind of approach. So
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, awesome. Yeah. What's your I don't know if you have one, but sometimes, let's say, you know, you've done your best to stay on track, to stay inspired, everything, but you have a deadline coming tomorrow, and either you're just dreadfully unhappy with what you have, or you just haven't written a scene, for example. What do you have some sort of secret weapon that you can pull out to be like, right, okay, this will fix everything? Maybe it's like a mantra. Maybe it's I don't know. For some people, it's like looking back at some really early work, and they're like, okay, well, whatever I have now is way better than this. No need to stress. People still like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of like self-love you have to have for yourself, you know, be like, you got this, you can do this, you know. You honestly, if you shouldn't have put yourself in that situation, you know, you know, you're setting yourself up for failure, which I've done before.
We've all done it, yeah.
Yeah, in that case, it kind of goes back to, you know, kind of doing muscle memory. So, you know, people have hired me because they like my sound, you know, and I just got to remember, like, okay, well, they're trusting me with this because they like not only, you know, my sound, but they like me as a person, and they like my workflow, and they like all these things. So it's like, obviously, it's like you have to put a little bit of trust in yourself, and when those situations do come up, definitely lie on your strengths. So, you know, yeah.
That's a good answer, I think, really. Yeah, I think a lot of, maybe for some people they're working around a lot of other people, but I think for most composers, etc., it's pretty sort of lonely work.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easy to get stuck in that negative self-talk, especially when there's pressure on, perhaps. But yeah, you're right. I think if you've earned the task or won the job, then this is a list of things that pretty much anyone can go through and be like, well, they did like me enough to give me the job in the first place, etc. That's a good perspective.
And the deposit's non-refundable, so, you know.
Yeah, there you go. That's very good.
I've had to have that conversation before, unfortunately. But to be fair, they were not a good client. And it's always really important to have conversations with a director and a producer about what they want their music to be like, what they want it to sound like, what they want the influences to be. And unfortunately, that case, they didn't know what they wanted. And I wrote the whole score and gave it to them. And then they were like, we kind of want it to be this vibe, completely different at the very end. And they okayed everything before then.
Well,
so yeah, at that point, I just had to walk away.
Okay. And that's probably one of the most, well, anyone that's ever worked with a creative knows that the hardest people to work with. So obviously when we're in this sort of field, you're always working with other creatives. How do you, what has changed about the way that you approach the work that you take compared to the beginning, when obviously there's generally quite a push to like kind of, okay, we're getting a job, we should take it. How much has that shifted in the course of your career, where you're really ensuring that the people that you actually work with, you know, it's going to work and it's not going to be a lot of hard work working around people? Is this a huge focus for you? Or
I think so. I mean, like, obviously I do this for a living, and I have, you know, I have children, I have a wife, I have lots of responsibilities. So it's like I have to I have to be paid an honest wage for my time. So there's definitely a lot of weeding out, well, this project seems really fun, but they don't have a budget, or they have, like 1/10 of what I would charge, so
Yeah.
um, there definitely is a little bit of, I don't want to say favoritism, but there are some clients who don't have as much money as I would typically charge for a score, but because I like what they do and I like their vision and I know that the film is going to do well, I may take a cut financially because I know that film is going to play at this place. It's going to be seen by these people. So that way it's like free publicity. So it's like, I kind of I approach it that way.
Okay.
But if it's not people that I know and respect as creatives, and then it's more or less, this is my rate. And especially if it's like not a great film, this is my rate,
Yeah.
and that kind of weeds stuff out. So it's definitely a balancing act of, I'm not a nonprofit, I am a for-profit business. So,
Yes.
there's definitely a combination of projects for, writing music for a potential, like a demo, for something, which is obviously, that's just a crapshoot in of itself. That could pay out, it could not pay out. So you have those, and then you have passion projects, which typically don't pay anything, which I typically don't do. And then there's kind of lower rate type of things, where either the directors are really great, or I trust the vision. And typically on those things, they will give me time so I can work in between other projects on them. And then there's this is my rate, this is what I'm focusing on. So there's different kinds of projects that kind of interweave together,
It makes sense. Do you feel like in the beginning of your career, this was something that you didn't do so well at, and did that cause issues for you? If so?
I think a lot of the issues that I had early on was not knowing how to communicate. I think honestly, that's probably one of the biggest things that composers need to work on, and just humans in general.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, it's just being honest, being, very clear about, deadlines, expectations. Yeah, I mean, I remember I had the worst job I ever did. The director and I just didn't see eye to eye, and I was hired by an executive producer, and the director said he wanted this, and then I wrote something and he didn't like it, and then I changed it again and again and again. And I remember the night that it premiered at a local festival, the night before, the director emailed me and said, "Hey, just a heads up, I know you're going to the screening. I took all your music out and replaced it with temp music. No hard feelings." And it was really, it was not good. I had spent, the gig paid okay, but I think if I broke it down, I probably got less than minimum wage for the amount of hours I put into it, but I remember being really upset, and it was really tough. But that director actually, it was his first film, and the short had a huge budget because it was being executive produced by someone who, is not a filmmaker. So there were a lot of red flags. You know what I mean? Like, the director was his first film, didn't know how to communicate. There was an executive producer who wanted, he was very green, and he wanted this thing, and he actually was a composer too and wanted to write the music. So I had to interweave my own score with his ideas, and then somehow mesh with this director at their own thing. So it was a situation of too many cooks in the kitchen. And had I communicated what I needed early on, and been able to, communicate more clearly to the director, I think a lot of the situations would have been resolved. Yeah, so I think communication at the end of the day, like everybody can play, everybody can write music. There may be different approaches, but communication is really important. So, yeah.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah, I think that's definitely something nearly everyone could work on is
Yeah.
communication. Some people are fantastic, really amazing. But for most people, I think
they're politicians. I'm not a politician. So.
Yeah, that's a different kind of communication. That's called lying.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Okay.
No, it's too harsh. We'll steer clear of the politics.
I'm just being silly.
Yeah, me too. I don't mind. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're sitting? Because that wall behind you, that looks awfully close. What sort of room are you in?
Yeah, I built a shipping container studio next to my house. I moved my desk at this angle because I'm putting up panels, but it's just a 20 by 8, or it's a 20-foot high cube. It's like 18 feet by like 7 feet and some change.
Yeah.
So it's pretty narrow. But I got tired of paying rent for space, so I built a studio.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, to save money because it's really expensive. Rent is really high over here. So.
And how do you feel now? Obviously, you said before that it's maybe like a 20-minute journey to get to and from studio from home.
Now it's 20 feet.
20, yeah, it's gone from 20 minutes to 20 feet. Is that dangerous? I mean, obviously to everything, there's probably advantages and disadvantages, but do you feel there was some sort of advantage to having a little bit of a bit more separation
of church and state, as they say?
Yeah.
I definitely think so. I definitely have to put safeguards around. It's like, it's so easy to just like, I'm just gonna go lock up real quick. You know what I mean? And then it's like I'm out here for 45 minutes tinkering with the sound or sending emails. Yeah, I mean it's tough. It's hard. But the commute is amazing. And so
positives and negatives. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, I've experienced this in the past, switching from working very, very close, if not at home, to in a remote studio.
Having a physical door that I can close that's like and taking steps, as opposed to it being like in my living room or being in a spare bedroom, is I think bigger because like it's so easy to like if you're working from home to like leave the room and be like, oh, I'll flip laundry and or I'll cook something and then watch a show and then I'll do this. And it's like by the end of the day, it's like you got 4 hours of work done. You know what I mean? Your house is clean, but
procrastination is winning. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, having a separate space is really allows you to flow a lot better, and there just isn't these other distractions that exist in a house, which I think a lot of people are probably feeling.
For sure.
At the moment, for sure, with the lockdown situation around the place.
I mean, oh, it's okay. Yeah, I would say when I used to have a studio about a mile from my house. It was at a post-production facility. We had they had the psych wall, so like a big psych wall, a big like space to record in. So like whenever I would do video content, I would always use their space, and they let me use their gear. They'd film it for me, and it was just a really great working atmosphere. But they shut Atlanta down, and where I'm from, in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States, and I had to move my studio home. And it was definitely challenging. I started out early. I started in 2015, kind of pursuing music composition. And in 2017, I went kind of part-time doing it,
Okay.
And then I'd say maybe 3 years ago, I went to doing it full-time. Yeah. So I remember the beginnings of like working in a bedroom, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I was like, oh shit, I'm back here now. It's like, no, it's so hard.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a tough situation. And my girls were homeschooling at the time too. Oh, wow. Well, they just started going back in person, but I couldn't imagine
Yeah,
doing that. It's too hard.
it's tough.
So hats off to people who do that. It's
Yeah.
too much for me.
Yeah, we're looking forward to changes ahead with regards to that situation for sure. Um, yeah, and that's I think you gave some really good answers there. Some stuff that's going to definitely help people. It definitely surprised me with a few of those. You somehow knew what I was going to ask next all of the time.
It all flows, man. It all
Yeah, it was
flows
nice.
together.
It was very
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, I think that the main takeaway that I always try to give people is to nobody's gonna, you're not just gonna magically get the job. You know what I mean? There's a lot of work. And I didn't study music production at all. I got a cracked version of Logic. If Apple's listening, I purchased Logic since then. But, and I just studied on the job. So and I met as many filmmakers as I could. And I would go to different kind of screenings in my hometown. There's a couple independent like theaters. So I would get on Facebook groups and I would just meet all these people and go to their screenings and then just connect and get coffee and get a beer. And I just developed relationships like that. And from there, I just started working on bigger and bigger films and then started traveling with films and just developing relationships that way. But I remember at the very beginning, it was so difficult to find any like footage to write music to find any kind of thing. And I feel like it's gotten a lot easier since I started, even just over a couple of years. But no one is going to give you the job. You got to hustle, you got to work. And, I think that a lot of people are okay with mediocrity, and I think that to truly do well and to succeed, you have to put the time in and put that extra little bit in, I mean, it takes me, I've gotten a lot faster at writing music, but I obsess over every little automation dot, over every little swell or every little instrument. Is this warranted for the scene? Is this the right sound? Is it recorded well? Obsessing over the right attack and release of a synth, of a VST, all those things, while they seem exhausting and daunting, at the end of the day, it shows in your work. And if your work is top notch and you're a kind person and, you're humble and you work hard and you're respectful and you hustle and put in the time, you'll be successful, So it just takes time.
Perfect. Yeah, time is the ever important ingredient that no one wants to acknowledge.
Yep.
Is part of their recipe.
Yeah.
It's a bit frustrating, isn't it? But I think in time you begin to realize how kind of powerful time is, for sure.
Yeah. So the last thing I will say too, is to study film as much as you can.
Yeah.
Not just studies film scores, like those are great, obviously, but understand why that music is so great in the context of the scene. And study story and study a scene, like break down scenes, and read scripts and do the work outside of the music, because the music, as amazing as music is in film, it's secondary to the story. And sometimes music can be it can be the lead, it can carry the piece, but 90% of the time, I think it's supportive, and it's supportive through minimalism, through space, through silence, no music at all. Like I always tell people, whenever I'm writing music, if there's space, I'm actually writing the space because I'm choosing where to cut music out of it. So that's actually focused as well. So study film as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with a lot of different jobs coming up, and not some of them are short jobs, some of them long jobs, some of them you're getting paid a lot, sometimes not much. How do you keep your budgets in check?
I think one of the most important things for any composer, any self-employed person, or any person in general is budgeting and living within your means. So, am very fortunate to have had jobs that have paid well. But I've had, strings where jobs are in between and I don't have work coming in. So, I mentioned earlier when I was at Aldi's, buying food. Well, I chose that place because it's budget friendly. So, finding, living within your means, not having a new car, not having, all these things that you kind of have to, and as in America, there's I don't know how it is over in Germany, but in America, it's very much like there's a status to having certain things, I guess it's probably like that over there too. But, like I drive a car that's used and it's older, but, it's paid off. So I don't have a car note and my house is paid in full and I don't have a house. I don't have a mortgage. And I built this container studio and I budgeted that down to line items, like to every little screw. So, I know how much money I have coming in. And because I keep my income or I keep my expenses low, if I have an amazing month, instead of going out and buying things, I, space it out. So it's like, if I don't have a gig for 3 months, I'm okay because I have this money coming in. You know what I mean? So, that's obviously, that's kind of a big expanse, like 3 months is a long time, but I have, say I have a banging month, like I made, like 20 grand, you know what I mean? From a couple projects, I can use that money to pay myself out of my business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, yes, it's good to buy gear, but at the end of the day, you got to like, remember that this is a business and you have to pay yourself with your business. So, I think that the other thing as well is when you're starting out, if you can, it's really important to have a space that looks professional, especially, if you're doing Zoom calls, things like that. So, try to get some, maybe buy used furniture if you can't afford nice new furniture, but have a space that looks professional. If it's either renting a small room somewhere, if you have the budget for that, or turning a spare bedroom, things like that.
Yep.
All these things kind of can work to your advantage, but I definitely think that, instead of going and buying that piece of gear right now, because you have to have it, work with what you have. And then like the limitations, like I remember the first 2 years, I only had a laptop, a MIDI keyboard, a cheap USB like interface and headphones. I didn't even have reference monitors. Okay. And I did that for 2 years because I didn't, I didn't have the money for it. And I just slowly put aside a little money here and there. And I would buy used gear as well. I'd look on like Reverb, or I'd look on Craigslist. I don't know if you guys have that over there.
Somewhat a little. It's still here, yeah.
But Facebook, whatever. Yeah. And I would just, kind of look at the very end of the month because people will need to sell their gear to pay rent. So I'd take advantage of that. But just be very conscientious and budget oriented, work out a budget with your groceries, with your gas, with your rent, all those things. Because, I think what scares people the most about this job and about this industry is that, oh, well, you can't make a living. You can't do these things. You can, but you have to live within your means. And when bigger jobs come up, maybe buy a nicer used car or, buy a house somewhere, you know what I mean? But like, just be conscientious with your budget. I think most of the people that I talk to that want to get into film scoring or doing it, but can't make that jump is because they can't, you have to sacrifice something, and for me, I'd much rather live a modest life doing what I love than not being able to do it because, I want to have this and this and this and this. So, it's just different strokes for different folks, obviously. But I think that's one of the most important things that people don't ever talk about, because at the end of the day, it is a business and you have to pay yourself. You have to provide for your family or yourself or whoever. And I think it's extremely crucial. There's a guy here in the States called Dave Ramsey. It's called Financial Peace is what he calls it.
Okay.
And it talks about like the envelope system where you can essentially you put all your money in envelopes and then you pay for it with cash. Obviously you can't do that now because of COVID, but you know, like even though it's not composing and it's not music production or any of these things, it still applies. So just like I educated myself, just because I educated myself on, you know, learning how to do editing with Premiere, same concept, because, you know, learning how to build a budget, you know, that translates into spreadsheets. When I'm doing a bid for a gig for someone, I can budget out because I know how to budget because I've done my own budget. So yeah, study budgeting.